Welcome to the ACS Technical Advisory Board podcast series, where we talk all things tech including data, cyber, AI, blockchain, and Internet of Things. Meet your host, Dr. David Cook, Vice President of the Australian Computer Society's Technical Boards. David is a technology advocate dedicated to advances and progression of computing and human-computer interaction. In today's episode, David will be talking with ACS AI and Ethics Committee member Lynn Warneke. Join us as we discuss the pros and cons of AI-assisted committees and boards, the value of regulations and frameworks. And we discuss if directors, committees and boards should embrace artificial intelligence.
Today, I'm speaking with Lynn Warneke. Lynn has a professional background in data transformation, digital strategy and AI. She's well known for her innovation programs and she's a fellow of the ACS. And she's also an active member of the National AI and Ethics Committee for the Australian Computer Society. Lynn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with an issue about capability and capacity. And you do a lot of work now in terms of helping boards to understand how best to govern and to prosper and to regulate themselves, I suppose. Do you think there's an issue there that boards really understand the capability and capacity needs, given that we've got a much more emergent AI technology environment?
Well, boards are certainly catching up quickly to this space as AI, of course, moves with enormous momentum across the globe and into contemporary business. So it's very much a topic, a contemporary topic at the board table. So yes, I'm on a number of boards now. I've transitioned from a long executive career in technology into a non-executive director career. And I think one of the reasons that that transition has been successful for me thus far, David, is because boards, or those I'm on, have recognised the need for technology capability at the board table. And I think increasingly the majority of boards recognise that that is a capability that is absolutely required. Perhaps previously boards were of the view that maybe we could bring that capability in through management or maybe through an external advisor. But now as we do our skills matrices and so forth, there's absolutely a recognition we need technology expertise as part of the governance skill set. And that has probably been true for some years, partly driven by cybersecurity, of course, and increasing regulatory focus on the compliance aspects of cybersecurity for organisations. But AI is absolutely accelerating that requirement for boards.
So do you think at the board level, does you think that means that now we just need to add one or two extra people who've got technology, or is it about getting the existing board members to upskill and become much more aware, or is it a combination of both?
It's a great question. And yes, you've answered for me. It's absolutely all of the above. And I think it's true, certainly of the directors that I work with, that there's absolutely a recognition that they need to upskill, they need to become conversant in some of these technology terms, functions that perhaps aren't familiar. And I think for boards, we're for directors, we're always needing to upskill, we're always needing to ensure that our professional development is, that we're pursuing that our skills are current. We recognise that, for example, in areas of finance, to have, a grasp of our legal obligations. Perhaps our board members, it's a general comment, not a criticism at all. Technology is very unfamiliar still to a lot of the C-suite executives and including directors. So there's maybe been a little bit of fear or uncertainty associated with that, but definitely a recognition that we have to upskill in that area. So yes, we need some experts, I guess, around the board table in the same way that we would say we need a finance expert, of course, on all of our boards. But equally, we all recognise that we bear our duties and obligations as directors equally, and so we all need to upskill.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned things like the financial structures and so on, and we've always had frameworks for them. I wonder whether we need kind of a new set of frameworks, something that more aptly allows us to examine technology a little bit more, integrate in an integrated sense.
Yes, and from that governance.
As opposed to just something that's sort of an add-on on the top. Do we need different frameworks, or are we happy with the ones we've got?
I think we've got some. I don't think they're necessarily fit for all of the emergent purposes that we need to apply them to. And I think in the technology space, there's increasingly a risk of silo or fragmentation of frameworks. So cybersecurity, of course, has been a governance and a board consideration for at least 5 years now. So we have some good principles, some great frameworks. There are a number of entities like Governance Institute of Australia, the Australian Institute of Company Directors that have produced excellent guides, principles, checklists, and so on. They're now starting to move into spaces, like AI particularly, which is the technology of the moment, not the only one, but certainly having considerable impact and with a broad range of risks, issues and opportunities. So as we develop, or as new frameworks around that technology are developed, of course, as technologists listening to this podcast would know, AI has many tentacles and many touch points into areas like cybersecurity. So too many frameworks, too many sets of guidelines, checklists and so forth, I actually think is going to become a governance issue in itself.
Right.
So that's what I mean about some of the frameworks that are coming out are very useful to help sort of bring focus and some consistency and clarity to what is a very complex space. But I think they're going to be sort of transitional or evolutionary as we go forward.
So picking on that complexity issue, I want to raise the idea that, do you think in general, and obviously each board's different, but in general, do boards really understand that nexus between technology and risk, particularly with an emergent AI? Do they get it yet, or is it that it's too complex for them to fully understand? Are we going beyond the capability of the average board member to make genuinely professional decisions?
Oh, that's a very provocative question. So as a contemporary director, I will say that by and large, my colleagues are very smart and capable people. And I think actually, in all seriousness, you're pointing to one of the challenges of AI, full stop, right? That it's enormous complexity. It's, what do we call it? A general purpose technology. Some people may disagree with that, but, its manifestations, its applications, its functionality is so varied, it's so broad. So when we talk about AI, the risk of AI, what are we actually talking about? We're talking about risk in so many different contexts, applications, and so forth. So I think that is a challenge in and of itself. I do absolutely think boards are so attuned to risk. It's one of our core obligations is, of course, to manage risk for our organisations. So they're absolutely aware of, attuned to, focused on the risk conversation. Do we have depth of capability internally in all cases to help us work through, the risk mitigations and application of our risk management frameworks? Not all of us have that luxury yet. The ACS, of course, has been very active in some of its publications, looking at some of the skills deficits that we have. So that is absolutely a real issue for organisations, particularly smaller or not-for-profit organisations where we don't always have the resources to actually bring in that kind of skill set or have that continuity to support the board. And that's sort of true at all levels of the organisation and up to the board itself. So we need all the help we can get, and this is a key role for technologists and for fora, for organisations, for entities like the ACS, and of course the AI and Ethics Committee, which is one of the reasons I joined the committee. So we have a really important role to play at all levels of organisation and business activity, including governance.
When I look at the way in which boards look at risk, and this is the very familiar standard quadrant of known risks, known unknowns, unknown knowns, and then you get to that bottom one, unknown risks. That's the part where AI turns decision making on its head. Not only they're the things that you don't know about, but that you might not even possibly even imagine in any sense, whether just from a regulatory perspective or even from a possibility in terms of technology. And
exactly.
I think that's the issue.
It really is. And AI increasingly involved in the decision infrastructure itself, a whole new sort of frontier.
So question with that notice, would you be prepared to allow an AI system to have a controlling or not a controlling, but an influencing voice at the boardroom of the the next generation boardroom next year, 2025? Would that happen?
Well, some boards have done that,
Yeah.
not in Australia, but in other jurisdictions. Famously, Salesforce, I think, has its AI Einstein as a board. I'm not sure what they call it, observer,
associate,
advisor.
Yeah.
So certainly in many common law jurisdictions, a director has to be a natural person. So we don't have very many examples of AI directors yet. But there is, I think it's the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales has famously recently appointed an AI advisor to its board. Similar things have happened in Middle East, I think. So we're certainly seeing advisors come into the board that we anthropomorphise as humans and joining us at the board table. Your question, would I be prepared to have an AI advisor or indeed a director on one of my boards at the moment? No. I think absolutely directors should be becoming familiar with AI technologies, and that does mean engaging meaningfully with some of the solutions that are available from the director perspective, exploring the ChatGPTs and Perplexity.AIs and so forth of this world. Absolutely, because how can you govern something if you don't really know it or understand it? Having said that, I'm not suggesting for a minute that directors should become AI coders or engineers anytime soon, but having that sort of working familiarity with the tool set. I do think that the risk profile of AI solutions or offerings in the market currently, by which I mean bias that's coded into some systems, generative AI and its tendency to produce errors or inaccuracies, hallucinations, as we call them. At the moment, I think those issues are too significant to warrant unqualified contribution from AI at the board table. But I do think it will come. I think it will come probably quicker than we realise, at a scale that we perhaps don't expect, definitely within my governance lifetime.
Sure. Let's touch on legislative and regulatory reform, and particularly in Australia. We've got an emergent AI which is changing the way we look at everything and the way in which we talk about regulation. What do you think about, firstly, what do you think about the mandatory guardrails? Are they the sorts of, is that kind of the right direction to take? And then secondly, are we looking at technology properly, or are we just looking at technology applications? What's the differentiation there, and where do we need to place important boundaries around the rules?
It's a big question, isn't it? And it's one that all legislators are grappling with. Of course, we've seen the AI Act come out in the EU and set another threshold or benchmark, as they did previously with the GDPR. And I think that will have ripple effect across similar jurisdictions. Australia's been slower. Too slow to some critics, but cautious around regulating AI. And I think that's been the right pace, actually. We do often complain about the gap between new technologies and legislation, but I do think it's appropriate that law is methodical and rigorous, and that we're not too quick to regulate with legislation that may become out of date or inappropriate quickly. I, however, am a fan of regulation and legislation, particularly for incredibly powerful, complex, high risk applications of new technologies. So I think guardrails are absolutely appropriate and warranted in our legislative and regulatory sort of framework. So you made a really interesting point in your question about getting, I think, the balance right, though. Do we want a technology-specific approach to legislation, like the AI Act, or, given what I said earlier about AI being such a kind of an amorphous and general-purpose technology with so many applications and manifestations, is the better way to approach uplifting or reforming some of our existing legislation that might look at applications of the technology in context? And do we look at where we have gaps in our legislative patchwork and fill those with application specific, by which I mean the function, not the technology application, rather than an AI specific legislation. Personally, I'm a fan of regulation that's fit for purpose for application and function, rather than trying to come up with an all-consuming AI Act. And it's been really useful and interesting to watch some of the critique of the European Union AI Act to see where we can learn from some of their mistakes and leverage some of the benefits and right-size legislation for our country.
Lynn Warneke, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
To find out more about how the ACS is powering Australia's technology brilliance, visit us at our website, Facebook or LinkedIn. Want to get involved with the ACS technical boards? Email us at tab@acs.org.au and tell us a bit about yourself. Join us for more thought leadership, ideas and information through our other podcasts on the ACS YouTube, Facebook or on LinkedIn.